Good afternoon, everyone. Really pleased to see you here. I'm Camille Crittenden. I'm Deputy Director of CITRIS and Co-Director of the Data and Democracy Initiative. We're really pleased to have Professor Ted Selker here to talk with us about voting accessible technology. I'll give a further introduction in just a minute after a couple of quick announcements. We're really pleased to have you all here in person, and I also want to welcome our web viewers. These Research Exchange talks are always live webcast to the other CITRIS campuses at Davis, Merced, and Santa Cruz, so we're happy to welcome folks who are watching from those locations as well as anywhere else in front of your computer, where that might be. I have a couple of upcoming events I want to share with you. One is on October 27th. We will have a representative from the European Union come to talk about partnership and funding opportunities in the Horizon 2020 program. This is a large funding program that's sponsored by the EU, and for the first time, U.S. organizations are also eligible to apply in partnership with other European organizations. So it's a fairly complicated program, and we're very happy to have someone here in person who can give us some guidance on that. That event will also be webcast. So take a look at the Eventbrite registration. That will be on October 27th at noon here in the auditorium. Shortly after that, on Thursday, November 6th, there's going to be a day-long conference called Enabling Technologies for the Next Generation of the Intelligent Energy Infrastructure. That is hosted by our partner organization here in the CITRIS building, the Berkeley Energy and Climate Institute, or Becky, and I4 Energy, which is one of the CITRIS research thrusts. Finally, I want to call your attention to the deadline on November 12th for the Big Ideas Contest. This is sponsored by the Blum Center for Developing Economies, which is a really terrific program that offers awards and proposal guidance to undergraduate teams who are proposing various projects with social impact in a number of categories, including IT for Society, which is one that CITRIS sponsors. The Data and Democracy Initiative also is sponsoring two of the categories, one in open data and one in conflict and development. So please take a look at that, or encourage your students to look at that as well. Ted Selker directs research on accessible voting here at UC Berkeley and within the CITRIS Data and Democracy Initiative. Dr. Selker spent 5 years as Director of Considerate Systems Research at Carnegie Mellon University, the Silicon Valley campus. He was also responsible for developing the campus's research mission and teaching human-computer interfaces, Android product design, and research in voting with disabilities. Before that, he spent 10 years as an associate professor at the MIT Media Laboratory, where he created the Context-Aware Computing Group, co-directed the Caltech MIT Voting Technology Project, and directed the CIDI Kitchen of the Future / Product Design of the Future project. His work is noted for creating demonstrations of a more considerate world in which intentions are recognized and respected in complex domains. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ted Selker.
Hi, and as we go along, I tend to like innovation, and so anybody that wants to ask a question, I'll just toss the ball out to you. It's got a microphone in it and the black little end here is what you talk into. So just be aware that that is available as you need. Okay. So, well, it all started in 2000, as we know, and this work, the Election Assistance Commission, did not exist in 2000. I worked with others at Harvard and Caltech and MIT to write a big paper that got the Help America Vote Act. So the Help America Vote Act dispensed a lot of money to improve technology over the last 10 or 15 years. But the big problem, a lot of us thought, was that the research was more important to do before you buy the equipment, not after. And what we found at the very beginning was by studying the 2000 election, we discovered that 4 million votes were lost, over 2 million in the registration process, 1 million in ballot design and polling place operation. These are things that we could actually find. These were smoking gun problems. Maybe there are other problems, but these are the big ones. So in working on trying to make new technology, I've worked in many, many places trying to solve these problems. Over the last 3 years, we've been very appreciative of money to spend on voting for disabilities, and Shama Hoke, one of the main programmers on the project, and Dan Gillette, one of the main researchers on the project, are here today as well. And so I'll just start off by talking about registration. Registration problems, there's lots of, you'd think that there's not that much to do. Well, you know, we find registration forms in the backs of trunks months after elections happened. And when you register somewhere other than the election office, whoever has taken your registration has to get it to there. And finally, you'll know you're registered when you get a card in the mail and stuff. But just the process of going online, which is what we do today, to do that is really important. And so we've developed a couple of different web-based things that can help with online activities in voting. And more and more, there are lots of them. The simple one we have is take any web page and help structure the activity on that web page, maybe as a step in, maybe you would improve it in the future, but it turns out that 14.5% of the registered voters have reading disabilities. That means that they read significantly below their intelligence level. And with those people, we have found in some of our work that we can reduce their errors by like 3 times by structuring the activity. And you'll see over and over again in my work that we're trying to structure people's activity if we can. And so this is one part I'll talk about. And the other one is that we just want to analyze a website and see how accessible it is, because people sometimes make mistakes about that. Now, I would love to run the demo. I'm not sure that I'll succeed because I have to stop this presentation to do it. But I'll tell you about it. What we did is we made a web app which you can just drag a window like this around and put them all over so that you'd step through these. And each time you've done one of these things, I'm a citizen, it pops with this arrow to the next one. So as a trainer, in a minute I can set up a website to see what it would be like if I design it to structure the activity by having this scrim and openings for the things I want you to pay attention to. By the way, in a study published in ACM Chi several years ago, we showed that if the scrim is not too dense, you can read everything on the page as fast as if it was not having this scrim and aperture. And in fact, you can read this as fast as if it's the only thing on the screen. So it's been very, very successful at improving things. In fact, IBM uses it in their operating systems. In any case, we've made a WYSIWYG tool for making these kinds of things. It's available online, and you guys can play with it. And for using it, you can go through an activity, and it steps you through the activity step at a time, hopefully making you make less mistakes. The second thing that we, well, here it is. There's a trainer mode for setting it up, and here's these corners where you drag and stretch it. And then there's the user mode, which allows you to step through a step at a time. The other tool that we made that is to help people is that we have just a simple web app that allows you to take any website and get this over on the side, and it shows you what color schemes are used. So instead of saying you have to change it or whatever, it just shows you that this blue on blue might be a bad choice. It's just going to be hard to read, and it shows you the font sizes. It looks like, most of the fonts on this thing are 13-point. Accessible sites should really be 16, 18-point or bigger. And then there's only a couple of font styles used on this website. We like that. And then the fonts are, these are the ones. But when you choose alternative text image selection on this interface, it shows you how much of the website is set up for allowing people that have disabilities to look at it. So, you know, having the alternative text that they can use their screen reader to read. And so this is a very simple, quick thing that shows small changes you could make. Just change the font, change the color scheme, add accessibility that you can do, and it just takes a minute or two to run. So that is one of the tools that we've made available. If you go to our website, you can try it, you can download it. They work on Chrome especially. And so I actually think that those are big steps that can make getting registration done online easier. And that is more or less how most interactions with the government are going, I believe, too. Polling place operations is a very important problem. And we see over and over again simple mistakes made by poll workers, well-meaning poll workers, and just physical setups of polling places and a lot of other little issues cause people to fail in their voting experience. So, you know, I say that this is a transparent polling place. That is, you can see everything that's going on. Getting to the polling place, distributing information, voter check-in, equipment setup, ballot assignment, poll worker training, chain of custody of all of the materials, counting the ballots, and certifying the ballots are all necessary for success in a polling place. And I have personally poll watched at probably 300 polling places, and I have never seen a place that doesn't have some problem. Now, you know, problems are small and big. Most poll workers are trying very hard to do their job. It's a stressful job. People are doing it very, very rarely, and I'm not talking just about the poll workers. So supporting them, we start thinking about some of the fun things we've seen. Here's somebody having just decided, well, they'll post the polling place stuff on the accessible door. Of course, when you go up to read it, it smashes you in the face. You know, the getting to the polling place is always a matter of people put up these stickers that they thought of putting up at the last minute, often with Sharpies. That's a problem. Here's a situation. This is actually the 9th Ward right after Katrina hit New Orleans, the first election. And there'd been a terrible problem, actually, in the presidential primary where polling places had not been open till, in some cases, 2 in the afternoon, the election before. So this time, what we have is these people without, I don't see if you see them, but there are people guiding everyone to get to the place. There's no parking places, and yet people from the Secretary of State's office showed up and directed traffic. And they did so many things to make this polling place work. This is the biggest polling place that's ever probably been. 50,000 people were supposed to vote in this warehouse. There are 50 different precincts that were represented. And it ran like smooth as silk, partly because these guys, with their ThinkPads, were all sitting there checking every person that came in, and then they have next to them a pile of paper of the other polling places they might have to go to, showing them the map to get there, showing them which polling place to go to, and there were no lines. Now, it was just after Katrina. There weren't actually 50,000 people that voted there, only 5,000. That's just about 5 times what normally you'd want in a polling place. So I was really excited about that. And a typical polling place, though, is not quite that organized. People just tape things on the wall, on poles, and that's kind of how it feels. This particular woman was supposed to make a activation card, and she made them with this thing here instead of this one up here. So this one up here is what she was supposed to put in, but she put in that one. So for 2 hours, we had these are the people that aren't getting to vote for any of the local issues. You can see they're kind of not happy. That's because she'd given them the wrong ballot. And that kind of mistake can't be fixed. Once they voted with their ballot, unless they decide to spoil it, they don't get away with it. You don't really want to have a polling place where somebody across the room can watch the guy voting, how he votes. You should have privacy. This is a polling place in Boston where we have a lot of people helping each voter vote. Assisting people in voting is one of the major places where fraud occurs. Also, these lamps. This is 9:30 in the morning, and they've gotten the lamps set up. They didn't have them set up until 9:30, so that was a dark place to vote. So that just giving you kind of feelings for the problems you see. Here's somebody that's the way to get to this voting place is through a cafeteria. So here we have somebody posting that up there. You have to come in through the back, through the kitchen to get to this polling place if you're to be accessible, because the other place has a very long stairway. Here's some people coming to vote, and notice this signage down here. It seems kind of hard to get to look at if you're one of these people, there's no reason to have set it up that way. You want to set things up so that people can use the materials that are important to do. So we made something called the polling place support tool. And as I say, I have all these things running on here. I could demo them later, but I don't want to break the PowerPoint. It doesn't want me to change out in and out. So what we did is we made a WYSIWYG experience where you drag, just like an architectural thing, you drag registration desks and paths and the polling booth and the ballot box onto one place. And this is our older version. And one of the fun things is it has checklists so that you can go through and see in their simulated polling place what you should do at each of these stations. And if you want to, you can leave a note on it with a picture. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more as we show you the newer version, which you can play with. It has a look like this when it's all set up. These are electrical power lines and here's the outlets. And we've seen so many problems in polling places with electrical power. I watched a polling place go down twice because they plugged 20 voting machines into one outlet. And how should people move through it? The new presidential commission report found that just people understanding how the paths through a polling place work is a problem. And I saw a situation where we had a set of stairs, everyone had to go up, and then there were 4 polling precincts inside, and one of them had a little bit of a holdup, and so everyone was waiting 40 minutes. So because they couldn't get through that door to see that they were supposed to go to somewhere else. So this happens all the time, or can. It's always potential. So we are able to make this thing up, and we can put couches in places and so on, and scatter the whole polling place with the things that are in there. And we have these ways of putting all sorts of things, whether they be furniture that existed, pre-existing columns, everything like that. So what would you use this for? Well, what would you use this for? And as this is, let's see. Yeah, so these are the different things that you can grab, furniture, these electrical things, and put them on that screen and play around. So what you would use this for is that an election official could, ahead of the day, play around with them when they know the size of their polling place, and then they could show them to the people that are going to be working there, so they can get experience with what the setup's supposed to be. And then on the day, they put the things where they're supposed to, which is really hard to get people to do. Everyone wants to be innovative, And then also, by having those checklists, instead of having a checklist, the checklist of things you have to check before the polling place opens is often 100 things. So if you have them attached to the actual device place in the room that you want to look, and you can go through that, now at least it's going to have a memory aid of place and thing you're supposed to think about. And then on the day of election, we can, if we have a problem with this system, I really hope that we'll get to the point where you put the note. You saw that note before I had a picture, and I started typing on it, and that note is then sent to central headquarters, and I want them to be looking at it. We haven't built this part yet, where they would then see that there's a note waiting for them on a picture of the polling place at that place. In 2000, there was a problem in LA, a lot of problems in LA, but getting through to central headquarters to report or ask about a problem was 40 minutes on the phone. Okay, that's not acceptable, right? You can't solve problems that way. It'd be really great if you could just glance at your map, see where the problem is, and address it immediately and send a message. I was actually in LA watching them do this process, and one of the things that I especially like about this tool that was missing there is they had a whiteboard. And up comes a problem, they write it on the whiteboard. And when the problem's solved, they wipe it off the whiteboard. Now, where's your audit trail? You'd love to know what problems happen so you can solve them for the next election. They had some, these guys have good memories, they remember all the stories, but this would be a way where we could put it all into one place and use it for all of these purposes. So this is a new app that I would love any of you to work on or try to get some place to try piloting. So these are some of the things that I think it can do, and I'm very hopeful that it will solve a lot of problems at the polling place, which is 1 million lost votes. Then finally, ballots. Ballots have all sorts of problems too, and we remember that there was a problem with the butterfly ballot in Florida where you had the people on this side of the page looked like they might be Democrat, but they weren't, and there's a butterfly ballot. People get confused. In fact, I did a study of, there was a ballot where the second race on the ballot was really small compared to the first race, and at that particular ballot, that was Sarasota, 2006, Sarasota, Florida, 13% of the people missed the second race, and it was especially weird that they missed it. A lot of people called it fraud. I ran 5 experiments to find out that what was wrong. The first 4 of them I found that there was no reason to miss the second one. That was because I'd given sample ballots to everybody. I'd given these sample ballots that you checked off what you did as you went along. Without that, people missed the second race because it was just a little thing at the bottom of the page. So back to our first demonstration I was talking about with those websites and what we're going to see in a minute. The idea of making sample ballots, pretending you're voting online, making a sample ballot, printing it out, and bringing it with you is the biggest single improvement you can do to make sure that you voted the way you wanted. In fact, just one more anecdote. There's a dear friend of mine, Don Merman, who's kind of a usability guy, maybe the best one, top or something. And him and his wife sat in a hotel one night doing their ballots, and then they exchanged to check on their work, and they each found an error in each other's work. So a lot of what we've heard of as people thinking they voted one way and seeing a different thing on their ballot, that flipping, we have another set of experiments a woman named Sarah Hill did, which shows that people, 0.5% of the selections you make on any ballot are likely to be for the thing next to it. So you check it. And that's what the sample ballot helps us with. That's one of the things the sample ballot helps with. So we're going to start with paper ballot improvements because it's become anathema to use anything but paper. Here, by the way, in New Orleans, there were 80,000 rejected ballots. And here are the reasons, the 11 reasons for all of them being rejected. It's very important when you do a paper ballot that you, whatever the rules are, whether you have to sign it, whether you have to have in their case, they wanted a notary to sign it with you, and so on, that you do all of those things, because otherwise they don't get counted. And that's one of the frustrating things about not scanning your ballot yourself. In fact, for paper ballots, if you do it in a precinct and you put in your own ballot, you have 0.5% more votes counted than if you take that same ballot and have it centrally counted downtown. We don't know all the reasons, but it's not a good story. So it's very, very important to be careful about how you handle your your ballots. So what we did when we found out that electronic voting was going to be a problem is thought about how to bring those same ideas that we'd been talking about, the ideas of structuring activity. And we started realizing that not only the 14.5% of people that have reading disabilities are important, 6.5 to 7.5% of registered voters have short-term memory problems. And that's not counting the million people that have sight loss and another million people that have tremor problems. So this is about the 10th version. Poor Dan and I, Dan's labored long and hard with me on this. This is a magnifying glass that sits over the ballot, and the illumination is probably as important as the magnification, and the fact that it can move along allows you and forces you to kind of move in a structured way through the ballot. And that's the most important thing to me of the whole item, is making people go through it in a procedural way so they don't miss a race, so that they focus on one thing at a time, so they know that this box has to do with this text. All of those things. Like I said, we've made 10 of them. I even sold. This one here is a remnant of one that Inclusion Solutions sold for a little while, which is nowhere near as good. You have to be able to write under it. Your tremor problems go away when you're not holding it in your hand. So very simple thing, but taking a lot of the things we learned, and I'll tell you a little bit more about, from other ways of voting that maybe are a little bit, that have other issues. Why this cord? This cord, and a little picture of how to use it, are so that you tie it to your polling place, because once you've left the registration desk and you go over to your polling place and you're going to go do your marking, and you got the curtain pulled or something, do you feel like going back and saying, I'm sorry, I need a magnifying glass? So people have a real hard time. They get embarrassed, and it's much better if we set them up for success than make them have to request solutions and solve problems later. So that is what we did with paper. Now, audio is a completely another thing, which is amazing. So a lot of the solutions for people that are sightless have been around audio. And what's disturbing about audio is that audio voting takes typically 8 times as long to vote, 8 to 10 times as long to vote as voting any other way. Press arrow for forward. Press Ted Selker, Democrat. Press arrow for forward. Press back arrow for back. You press it. Presidential race. Press forward for candidate. That's how slow it goes. I'm almost repeating words I've heard. So what we did is we considered a whole lot of things. And one of the ones that we had a success on, it was published this year at CSUN, was ways of thinking about how to do write-in. Now, write-in on your phone all day long, you write in Schwarzenegger and it fixes the spelling, you're all done. Well, when you're writing in for an election, you don't want a computer to be rewriting or fixing spelling or anything. That's kind of what would be called fraud. So you have to spell it out yourself. Spelling it out yourself, and we've been running some experiments in Maryland where we find that nobody can do it. It's just amazingly hard. I mean, it's minutes. So we have this thing where this we compared just different ways of using keys to move through the alphabet to pick the letter. And basically what we learned was the simpler the better. The fewer buttons you press, the better. And also, if it's noisy or complicated stuff going on around you, this method that we came up with where it says A, B, D, C, F, G, H, it goes through and it stops at key letters. So it doesn't go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. It goes A, B, C, D, F. So it stops at a specific place, and it kind of goes jumping forward like that, structured the alphabet, and made people more sure of their selections and better able to make selections in noisy environments. And I would switch over to do that, but time is the way it is. What else did we learn in this that's really interesting? Well, okay, I want to say one more thing. We started off with grand aspirations, and I think they're still plausible. I did some experiments earlier where we had different voices coming from different angles to represent the different decisions you could make. And we were able to cut the time to listen by using what's called the cocktail party effect to kind of 1/5, but we never made it work well with computers, and we aren't yet there. The point is that if we can make the selections so you can hear all, somehow parallelized, we could reduce the amount of time you have to listen to it. Another thing we did that is successful and is being used, I believe, by some, is something we call brevicons. And my student, Matt Hockenberry, did this work where we would take forward, turn into forward, turn into third, turn into third, and each time you listen to it, it gets shorter, and if you continue to be able to be successful, we can cut the length of these structural words, which is a lot of what you're listening to, is forward, back, stop, selected, to much, much shorter. And that's another audio technique. So still searching for new audio techniques to improve audio voting. Audio voting has lots of advantages that we would love to improve, and it makes it so people can vote. Well, I don't want to say whether they can vote on phones or not, but anyway, they can vote more easily. Okay, because actually people, for example, Rhode Island used to give everybody, send all sightless people Braille ballots. Does anybody know what's the problem with that? Only 10% of sightless people can read Braille. Okay, this is a problem. So it's really hard to get away from audio for sightless people now. So we have also been thinking about how can we structure the activity when we are doing it, making a sample ballot up, or maybe voting overseas. And so we have a couple of different things going on. This is an overview of all of the races that are on this ballot, and here is one that I've selected. And this is our idea of how to make what we call a low error voting interface. So this is an early one where you can see that somebody has voted on this, they are voting on this race and made a selection. You can see that, whoops, I don't want that to happen. You can see that there were 4 races that they had to vote for here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they voted for all of those. And this is what's called the review page. So they're looking at the review of all of the things they voted, and they can see in 2 different ways, the gray and those red things, that they did not vote on some of the races. This is one of the most important things that the Help America Vote Act said, is you have to have a second chance voting. That means you have to see whether you voted or not and be able to change it. And you can see in this example, these guys have been voted, and we have this opening. That tab is open, saying now I'm working on this ballot. Anyway, less error prone, almost less than half as many errors for people voting with these low error voting interfaces compared to the standard direct record electronic interfaces that were available when we did this experiment, and also they preferred it. So that was a kind of a great moment for electronic display of ballots, but we have to understand that today we have to be careful about the whole electronic voting issue. But making sample ballots up will improve your voting. Please figure out a way to get a sample ballot in front of you, whether you do it online or print it up ahead of time. And basically, as I've been going through, I've been talking about a whole range of techniques and technologies that I've been trying to develop around all of the problems that we know of for people with disabilities voting. It's a delightful thing to work on because people in the ADA age, we all understand and realize that universal access is mandated by law. But I think there's something deeper and more exciting, which is that today's technology is moving and is is available to us in a deeper way than ever before. And we can, with a few months of work, try out ideas that no one ever imagined. And so instead of policymakers making decisions by simply having a bunch of lawyers say, hey, what can we buy off the shelf, today we're in a position where if we fund it, we can build new techniques, new technologies that will drive different kinds of government, different kinds of policy decisions that will be big improvements over what we would do without having that available. And so what my current theme when I go to Washington and I talk to people is to say this kind of funding where you fund technology, this is the report on the 3 years of work, where you fund the kind of new kinds of techniques development is the way of making policy decisions that are going to matter to the world. So that's kind of how I feel about this, and I welcome any questions, and I also am happy to show demonstrations of any of these things. And as well, I want to say that in the back of the room, we've put a couple page of things that could be fixed, even though we're only a few weeks away from the election. So the fact is the last moment is the hardest time to make big changes, but it's the easiest time to make tiny changes. So if you want a copy of that, or if you want to find out more about this, it's online, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ted. So we have time for a couple of questions.
Oh, yes. That's right. Yeah. So here, your job is to put that down, or I'll toss it out. Who wants a question? Into the black end. There.
Hello?
Yeah. Yeah, it's working.
Okay.
It is working. It is working. Yes.
It's working, but I think they might have turned it off.
No, it's working. I can hear it.
You can hear it, but what about the people in the
I can
other
hear it in
campuses?
the audio. So please just ask your question.
Okay. So I'm wondering whether the techniques for making voting more accessible couldn't also help make voting more inaccessible when used by people who wish to make it more inaccessible, sort of analogously to, let's say, redistricting, where you have theories of optimal redistricting, but it's also something that is used as a political
Very,
tool.
very good question. The question is whether people can use these accessible, making things accessible, a negative for people that don't need accessibility. We have not seen that. It could be, I guess people can do all sorts of nefarious things. That has not been one of the ones that they've tried. To be quite frank, what we found was that when accessible machines were available to everyone, the accessible machines got used by the people that needed them, and when they became only available to people that needed them, people did not vote on them. So we actually found the reverse, which is when we take the accessibility, when we take away the universal access, we've had more trouble with accessibility than when we made it universally accessible.
So these are great techniques to improve the machinery or the mechanism for voting. But I feel more and more that we have another problem in this country, and that is like the semantics of how do voters make decisions. And I'm really appalled by some of the propaganda I'm getting. Proposition X, don't get fooled. It's bad for children or it's bad for small business. And
it's a very good question, right?
Proposition is about.
Yes.
How can we really make sure that more people understand what's going on so they can actually make a rational decision?
Sure. Yeah. So the question of how do we design e-democracy is a very exciting question. And when I first got involved with voting, I went and I started talking to my colleagues at Harvard and Caltech that I was working with about that, and they said, if you start trying to change the way that people make decisions based on voting, you are committing fraud. So what can we do? We can make mechanisms for making proposition language accessible, and we have been trying to work on that. We can make it so that but as soon as you start saying, I'm going to change democracy so that we have to change the way lobbying works or the way information is disseminated, you're working in a different area. It's a great area, and I believe that someday when you're making decisions, when you're making that selection, you will be looking at all the information available, right, from both sides and everything else. League of Women Voters recently did a very nice piece of work around when you give people both sides of the decision, what happens to their decisions. And unfortunately, they found that often it's easy for them to get more strident, but that's another topic. Is there any other questions? That's it.
It doesn't work. So a lot of jurisdictions, including some states, have gone to all mail-in voting. And a lot of people, even in states where they could go to the polls, are choosing to vote absentee.
Sure.
So I'm wondering if you shouldn't be putting a lot more time into making those processes easier or more effective, rather than working on polling places, which are, I think, on their way out.
Yeah. So thank you. So the question is, are polling places on their way out? And certainly until 1896, people didn't have private voting. And the fraud, the major source of fraud in this country is from absentee ballot design. It's the number one place that fraud has occurred historically. It is much cheaper. That's a good thing about polling people at home. It's more convenient, some people think, but it is not safe. And the way we are doing it now, and in that list there are a couple of things that can be done to improve it. Quite frankly, I think a lot of them happen on cell phones to give you the privacy that would allow us not to have your wife voting for you, or you voting for your, holding a gun to your kid's head when he's filling out his ballot, or just losing the ballot. So it is a very disturbing thing. It is the biggest breach in security we know of. Is this absentee balloting? There are people serving time in prison for abusing it, but it has 17% of the country now does it. It's mostly an epidemic on this side of the country. Any other questions? Wow, exhausted. Do you have one?
So if you could make just one recommendation to local election offices about the upcoming election, what would you recommend?
Set up your polling place ahead of time and have the poll workers come and visit it and act like they're voting. That is the number one thing that you can do to make sure that you are set up. I literally was in a polling place where they changed it from being the basketball court to being a library at 6 in the morning before the election opened, and the election, the head of the clerk of all of LA County happened to be there with an international blah blah blah, and one of the polling booths just fell down, and she's wearing 4-inch red pumps. She gets down on the floor and starts putting the polling place back together. So it is, without testing things ahead of time, it's all we have lots of surprises. There was one more question from the vote at home advocate. Yes.
I'm just telling you the way things are. So you said a couple of times that electronic voting is a bad idea, as if that's a given, and we all understand why. And so I wonder if you could explain why and why it can't be made better.
Thank you. So the question is, what is the status of electronic voting? So that's a very exciting question for me. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. We have a really nice piece of data, which is in 2004, we had 4 states have all electronic voting. They were Florida, Maryland, Nevada, and and Georgia. And what's amazing about that election, and I can go back and show you that there were warts that happened before that, but is that in those 4 states, Maryland had 0.3% of people not make a selection for president. In 2000, the number was 1.9% countrywide, and everyone believed that 1% of people went into the polling booth and made protest votes, because no one had ever seen a number under 1%. So 0.3% is off the charts, and 0.4% at the other 3 places, 0.4 in Florida, Georgia, and Nevada, are especially interesting because they all used different equipment. So these were different vendors, and they had that kind of result. There are many reasons that they had such good results. By the way, the best we saw in any use of paper ballots statewide in that election was 0.9%. So they got a 0.5% worse residuals using the paper ballots. The reason I think they did is because you have that feedback. You watch people voting with it, and they talk about flipping. You make a selection, it makes a noise, you see that you did it. With paper, nothing happens, right? Now, if you do precinct scanning, which I want you all to try doing, then if you voted for 2 candidates, at least it'll come back out. That's called overvoting. But with the paper ballots, you don't have that feedback. So that was one reason. Another reason was that in Georgia, they cleaned up tremendously how ballots are designed and who designs them by moving to this new technology. That's a big piece of the story. In Florida, they had they deployed 700 people around the state to supervise making sure people were setting up and using the voting machines correctly. That was a big success because in 2002 it was a kind of a mess the way that they did it. They had all sorts of different technologies and all sorts of ways of setting it up, and they had some terrible problems. And in Nevada, there's another part that I could get into. I don't know if I should. Is the paper trails, but in any case, the electronic voting machines can help just for the usability reason. Improve. That's even without these fancy techniques I was talking about. I was talking about techniques that should reduce that residual even further. So it's a very exciting goal. Now, how do we make it secure? Well, I've advocated that when you're making a vote selection, you should not leave the booth until you see on a separate computer that it's gotten your vote got to the central headquarters, it got counted and is in the tally. Now, when I leave the booth, I'm not sure that I should be seeing such a thing. But that is one of the suggestions I've made, is that we can do new and better things to validate, verify, and that your votes are actually being counted, are being used by the way that they're supposed to, and so on. People have been concerned about fraud. And unfortunately, we've seen fraud with scanners. We've seen it with paper. I don't know that we have validated demonstrations of fraud with electronic voting machines, but it is, of course, a concern. And there are lots of this discussion is a very long, interesting one. And if you want, I know a lot about it. And by the way, Henry Brady across the street, who isn't here today, he and I have been on panels about this, and he knows a lot about it. A great man. Yes. One more. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, there you are.
I'm a legal assistant of Switzerland, and for many years now, I've been electronically voting from my office,
yes.
from my home. Seems to be no problem.
Yes.
Now, do the Swiss have so much better software? Are they more trustworthy or just naive?
Yeah, no, all of the above. I actually was on a panel at so I helped put together a workshop at the Swiss consulate in Washington, D.C. a few years ago, where we talked about what you guys do. One of the lovely things that goes on in Switzerland is that they vote all the time, like every 9 weeks. And so people are used to it. There's a rhythm, and people make less mistakes, I'm pretty sure, because of that. Estonia's had incredible experience with electronic voting. Brazil, using electronic voting machines, reduced their fraud from... Anyway, it was astronomical. It was large, double-digit portions of the votes were just fraudulent until they put into place this very nice voting system that they had very good checks and balances for the way it was made, designed, and deployed. They started this in 1996. They were down to 0.1% by 1998 of people didn't vote electronically, even up the rivers and in Amazon and so on. So there are examples, and Estonia and Switzerland are at the front of this charge, and we haven't had either of them go down for denial of services attacks. Maybe our friends that have big funding in security will go forward with it. I don't see I don't see Professor Wagner here today. But anyway, I'd like to talk to him about that if he wants. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.